Nate, have you been watching this go down for the last hour? I mean, are you sitting here wishing you were part of an ownership group right now?
You know, it's exciting times. Oftentimes ideas like this, they're just ideas, but for this to materialize in the way that it has, it does make me a little bit envious. That one, I'm not part of an ownership group, but also that I'm not in Vegas right now. I'm in Jersey, and it's a nice day in Jersey, but it's always fun to hang out in Vegas and talk ball.
Look, we were talking with Michael Vick, Chris Carter. They're all saying the same thing. We all wish we were there. We're going to be there for the player draft. We're all going to be there. So don't worry, you can come to Vegas. But look at
all right.
You're an NFL pro for 11 years, host of Good Morning Football. You talk about this stuff all the time. Fantasy football, from when you got into the league. Nick was just talking about a guy in his group who's been playing fantasy football since 1989. I mean, first of all, I didn't know it was around that long, and neither did he. But what's the evolution been of fantasy football that you've seen over the last number of years?
I think that's a perfect word for it, the evolution. And to be honest, right now is a revolution of how this is played. And there's so many different ways that you can approach this. And there's so many different types of fans. I mean, there's the traditional fan who you might look at as a consumer that loves the sport so much that they have to play fantasy ball. But then there's the players that have always played fantasy while they were playing and now removed from the game. It's still a big part of what they do. But yeah, I had to get caught up on when fantasy football started, when guys were literally checking the local newspaper the day after the game and trying to get the stats and then putting them in by paper and then faxing it to a group of friends. The evolution of the game because of technology, it's become such a fantastic piece of our sports culture. It's synonymous with the game right now. You can't talk about loving the sport of football, basketball, baseball, hockey without saying something about fantasy football and fantasy sports in general. So it's tremendous and it's an exciting time. And I'm just glad in one way or another, I'm involved in this.
Yeah, that is really, really cool stuff. And this is different. I mean, I've seen fantasy leagues where they run salary caps year over year, but they're just drafting a couple of receivers, a couple of running backs, a tight end, a couple of quarterbacks. This is a full 53-man roster. We're talking offensive linemen. We're talking defensive players, the whole thing. How difficult would this be to operate, as an owner?
It's very difficult, but I think that's the exciting part about it, is that it is difficult and it is challenging. How many of us, and I'm not just talking about your average fan, I'm talking about players too, who walk up to the water cooler at work or the barber shop, or you run into a buddy at the grocery store and you're sitting there in the frozen food section and you start talking about the moves you made in fantasy football, and your buddy's looking at you like, what? No, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Let's take it a step further. How many of us as fans, and I still do this till this day, where I'm watching something going on in the NBA or the NFL, Major League Baseball, hockey, and I'm like, you know what? I would have did that differently if that was my team. Now, not only can you call somebody else's bluff, but you can step up to the plate yourself and say, let me go ahead and run this team the way I would like to run it. And, we were talking behind the scenes about the entirety of what this really means. And it truly does give a different type of meaning to ownership, like owning something special, like a legit squad, a legit team from top to bottom, and then creating a team of people around that can help you accomplish what is the ultimate goal of winning.
Yeah, this isn't just, putting your $100 entry fee into your buddy's fantasy football. It's $175,000 that the Michael Vick and Chris Carter, Bud Crawford group put in to get the #1 overall pick. And I believe the 32nd franchise went for $13,000 US. So it's not small money. You got to invest to make sure your team is staying competitive and you're getting a return on your investment. But this is wild. So the question I have, how many fantasy leagues are you in a given year?
Well, when I was playing, I tried not to get involved in as many fantasy leagues because my wife, my brothers, and all of my close friends, they were in fantasy leagues. And, I would come home and my wife would look at me and say, listen, I need a big weekend out of you. And I'm like, look, from now on, don't draft me because this in-house conversation, if I get an ankle injury, you want me to rush back because you need the points, that's a problem. I really didn't start getting involved in fantasy football until I got close to retirement. That way I was completely removed from the game, and I didn't have any biasness, and I didn't have that hesitation on going out there and trying to win the league and not being partial because I'm playing against somebody or I'm a friend of somebody. And now, you look at fantasy football, and it is as attached to my name as anything else that I do. And I'm heavily involved in a yearly basis. And that's one of my favorite conversations is when I run into somebody. I love it, of course, when they pat me on the back. Every ball player does. And they say, hey, I remember that one year in '04, you helped me win it with 1,000 yards next to Randy. Like, I love hearing those stories. But more importantly, though, I like hearing the stories when somebody's like, you know what, Nate? You really blew it when you broke your arm trying to save that pizza. Like, I don't know what you were thinking, but my fantasy team went down the drain after that. And I sit there and I laugh and I understand because I also empathize with what fantasy league owners are going through. And that's why this right here is so exciting. It just takes it to a completely different level.
Yeah, really cool. So quickly, did you ever draft yourself?
No. This sounds crazy, but I didn't trust myself. I didn't because I was comfortable with being Robin. So on any given day, playing next to Randy, I'm gonna let him be Batman all day long. It's Randy Moss. Like, of course you play second fiddle to him. And then when I got to Detroit and I'm playing next to Calvin Johnson, like there's games where he's literally doing like all the heavy lifting. And I'm like, CJ, well done. 300 yards in a game. I'll add my little 65 and a couple of first downs. But that was the main reason because most of the time I knew the game plan and I knew where the ball was going. Occasionally, Nate Burleson will give you some numbers, but I like being a compliment. And that's what's great about this. You mentioned the full roster and the surrounding pieces to the superstars. And Eric Metcalf was talking about it, who's my guy, by the way. I love that dude. Absolute legend, one of my big bros. What's up, bro? But what he mentioned is having those picks later in the draft because those are the picks that are going to complete your team. I mean, just think about football in general. Think about the last champions that we've seen over the past few years. Of course, they're superstars, but it's always the X factors, the surrounding players, the complementary pieces. That's how you win.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you don't bet on your team, right? You don't bet on your team because you're always going to be disappointed whether they lose, whether you win the bet. So I like it. Just keep it out of it and you know the game plan. Although I think you're selling yourself short a little bit, but that's a conversation for another day. So the NFT.
I appreciate that.
I want to talk about the NFT because you're going to be part of the Legends League. How exciting is that as a player to get back in and be a star in fantasy football again on the field?
It's incredible. You know, I felt like I was able to walk away from the game and know that it was a mutual respect between me and the game. You know, I gave everything to this game: blood, sweat, tears, ligaments, bones broken, all of it. And after 11 years, you know, I felt like I didn't need to come back. And now this has been the most exciting, I guess, like reinvigoration of my love for being involved in the game. From this perspective, I've had opportunities to go back and coach. I've had opportunities to be a trainer. I've had opportunities to coach on every level, from professional to college. And I just said, you know what? I don't need to be involved in the game in that perspective. I've turned myself into a media personality, and I'm fine with that. But when I got this call, though, without hesitation, I was like, yep, say no more, I'm in. Because we'd all be lying to you if we said we didn't miss it. And we'd all be lying to you to act as if we didn't want our careers, our resumes to be rebuilt up in a way that not only puts a fan on the fantasy players, but also us as individuals ourselves. So it's exciting to be involved. And we have some really cool stuff when it comes to the NFT. Some stuff that hasn't been done in this space before when we're talking about really blending real life in sports and some of the aspects behind the curtains that people don't really get to see. We're gonna blow people's minds when it comes to these NFTs.
That's one of the really cool things about NFTs, right? The ability to build experiences, to build those add-ons to it. So I'm really excited to see what you come up with and where this goes and where the whole Legends League goes. But for now, I just appreciate you taking some time and an exciting day in fantasy football.